Are you ready to branch out, to take a leap of faith, to love yourself and others fully? Then let go of whatever no longer serves you to take action now on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. Erica will energize and excite you to power up your passionate dream that sets your soul on fire. With Erica's E3 approach, equipping, empowering, and enlightening yourself so you can be yourself for yourself. Get ready and get rooted to live a life without regrets, without what ifs, without should haves, and especially without empty feelings from a life unexplored. This hit show helps you build powerful and intentional roots to live it up, love it up, and let it go. Get fearlessly ready and powerfully rooted in your yes with your host, Erica Gifford Mills, and be fearless about your more and stand in your yes. Now on Get Rooted Radio.
Welcome, everyone. I am Erica Gifford Mills, and you are listening to Get Rooted Radio. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. A big shout out, as always, to my producer today, Moxie. Moxie, how are you doing?
I am doing great. It's a sunny, beautiful day here in Washington.
Hey, I love it. The sun's just starting to peek through. We've had thunderstorms all day, but this past weekend was gorgeous. I think it was like almost 85 on Saturday, and I'm so ready for spring and summer and outdoors and sunshine. So I got a question for you, Moxie. Have you ever had that internal GPS, the hair on the back of your neck sticking up, and you're wondering, should you listen to it or should you not? Have you ever experienced that?
Oh, yeah, I definitely have. And 9 times out of 10, that intuition was right.
Yes. And that's what we're talking about during today's episode. It's titled, Honor Your Instincts, Increase Your Intuition, and Quiet Your Inner Critic. And I think we all know, as women especially, the feminine intuition can be a woman's greatest superpower. But only if we listen to it. If we ignore it, it does us no good. And my guest today, Lisa Gillette, and I will discuss her science-based approaches to increase intuition. Oh, not tuition. We have enough of tuition rates increases. Increase intuition, access natural instinct, and quiet that inner critic so that we can rise and thrive. But first, a bit about my returning guest, and I'm so glad to have her back on the show. Lisa Gillette is an equal pay activist, podcaster, and certified leadership coach. She is passionate about her work increasing greater diversity in senior leadership, which we all need. During her own corporate career, Lisa relied on her instincts to survive and thrive. In her final role as an executive in sports television, Lisa relied on her intuition to help her successfully navigate the boys' club, maneuver past bureaucracy, and rise above the BS. Lisa's company, Big Sky Coaching and Consulting, is a natural extension of her desire to guide, support, and encourage women of all colors to advance in their careers all the way into the C-suite. We are more than welcome to you to the show, Lisa, because we need more folks to break through that glass ceiling.
Oh, thank you for having me, Erica. It's my absolute honor to be here, and I love your show. So thank you for having me once again as a guest. I really appreciate it.
Well, you always have some great insight, and it's things that listeners really need to hear. And that this first segment is going to be all about intuition and instinct versus ESP. So let's just jump right in. How do you define the difference between instinct, intuition, and ESP?
Well, let's start with ESP because it's the easiest to define, and almost all of us have heard of it as the sixth sense. And basically, there are 3 types of ESP, and that's not what we're going to be talking about today, but I just wanted to make sure I had my definitions correct. So extrasensory perception has 3 different, really large categories. One is telepathy, and that's to read other people's minds. But honestly, I think that anyone who practices emotional intelligence and is empathetic can actually be a pretty good mind reader. So let's put that off to the side for a minute. There's also precognition. That is part of ESP. And that's knowing things that are going to happen in the future. And again, I would say, if you feel like ESP is something you just don't have or you can't develop, if you pay attention, you can pretty much figure out if someone isn't doing their job, bad things are going to happen. Or if someone isn't paying attention when they drive, they could cause a traffic accident. So telepathy is a great thing, but I think if we just pay attention, we can predict some future occurrences. The other aspect of ESP is also referred to as clairvoyance, seeing things, hearing things, sensing things, clairaudience, clairsentience. But what we're really going to talk about today is intuition and instinct. So intuition and instinct are both based in our body and our brain. They do not rely on a sixth sense that some of us may feel uncomfortable exploring, or some of us just go, yeah, that's not me. You can have great instincts and strong intuition because these are both physical manifestations, and it's just our ability to pay attention to them. So I'm defining intuition, and you'll find most people do, has that ability to take in data through our five senses and see the patterns and pay attention to the patterns. And instinct is paying attention to what is going on in our body. You had mentioned, oh, you get that feeling on the back of your neck where your hair stands up and you know something's wrong. Okay, that's actually a response from our nervous system. And so instinct is by paying attention to, oh, I just met somebody for the first time and I like them. Oh, I trust them. That means they're like me. They either look like me or they sound like me or we share a common viewpoint. So that's instinct and intuition. And these are things that we can just pay attention to and learn because everybody has access to developing their intuition and accessing their instinct.
And I think that's really important for folks to understand is that everybody has this inside them, right? It's not some trick that you have to learn or something you have to study, except for studying yourself, right? Studying when things happen. When do I feel this? Because a lot of times people want to always see the best. Not always, I shouldn't say that. People want to see the best, which is a great characteristic, right? Don't always assume that someone's out to get you or always be looking at positive intent. But sometimes that can also backfire on us when we ignore those sensations, those feelings, the butterflies in your stomach or the churning or the feeling in the back of your neck or just something. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about this person. And when we ignore those, we ignore ourselves. And that's something that we need to really focus more on. So I did mention the feminine intuition.
Yes.
So does that really exist? And if it does, how does it work?
Oh, yes. I just want to respond with one comment that you made about always having the best of intentions. Maya Angelou has this great quote, which is something like this. I'm paraphrasing. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time.
Yes.
So let's talk about intuition. And I want to just go right to the brain because there is a difference between the male brain and the female brain, as there are differences in bodies and the chemicals that we have in our bodies. Men have more testosterone, women have more estrogen. And we know when we look at the difference between the female brain and the male brain, there are more neural pathways. Let me repeat myself. There are more neural pathways between the right lobe and the left lobe in the feminine brain. And the right lobe is that creative, artistic, musical side, a little bit more emotional. The left lobe is that logical, linear, analytical thinking side. I like to think of this, the left lobe has the digital side and the right lobe has the analog side. And when there are more neural pathways between the two lobes, we're able to access the strengths of each much faster. And so the neural pathways that go between the two lobes can be really large, like superhighways. They can be a little bit smaller, like 4-lane highways, or they can be as discrete and distinct as a garden path. And in the feminine brain, there are just so many more pathways, but everyone can actually create more pathways. And we can see in the feminine brain, there's more pathways, greater empathy, but there's also this wonderful thing called neuroplasticity. And so when we do things like manifestations, we practice meditation, we actually create more neural pathways, which create greater empathy, which mean that we have a higher level of emotional intelligence. So yes, there is a difference, but everybody can build greater neural pathways using neuroplasticity.
And I like how you put that. I mean, because it is scientific, right? But it's sometimes when folks are saying, we shouldn't make a difference between men and women, and it's like, but we are different.
Correct.
We should celebrate those differences because it is. And it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It doesn't mean that we can't increase the emotional intelligence. We can't increase those brain activities in our empathy and our emotional intelligence and our intuition and everything. And I think it's really important for folks to know that this is something that is real. It's, as I like to say, it's not the woohoo stuff, folks. There is things that we shouldn't listen to. And we tend to ignore a lot of that when, I'm tired. I just didn't sleep well last night. Right? There could be more to it. Just like, I'm just overreacting. Are we? Right? Let's take a moment to really include all of this into our everyday lives. And I think that's it's important. And if we got it, ladies, let's use it. Let's use that feminine intuition to work for us, not against us.
Right. It's a gift and let's access it. Yes.
Yes. So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about identifying the different voices and instinct, intuition, and your inner critic. But before we go, Lisa, tell folks how they can reach you.
The easiest way to reach me is to go to my website, which is bigsky, BIGSKY.coach. bigsky.coach. And there's a whole bunch of resources there too that anyone listening can access complimentary.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, listeners. And you are listening to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. If you missed any portion of today's episode, you can catch it on getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com. Don't forget to subscribe online to receive the latest news, events, specials, and words of encouragement. Go to getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Lisa Gillette. Lisa, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
So during the last segment, we talked about intuition and instinct versus ESP. And this segment, we will be getting into identifying the different voices. And, I used to joke, I hear voices. If you see me talking to myself, I'm having a staff meeting, just move along. We're all good. But there's another voice in our head, right? So tell me about that voice.
Oh, this is the voice that Carl Jung called that annoying little voice that shows up at the most inopportune times, called the inner critic. And this is the voice that says, oh, don't do that. Oh, what are people going to think about you? Oh, you're going to fail. It's that not enough message, which for some people, they hear it has the too much, you're too loud, you're too overbearing, or the you're not smart enough, you'll never be good enough. It's that voice. And that's part of our basic survival system as human beings. This is the voice that keeps us safe and small, but we outgrow it. As we become adults, we step into our agency and we begin to realize that little voice is treating us like a 3 or 4-year-old. And so we need to acknowledge it because we're never going to get rid of it. It's part of who we are. It's part of that system, fight, flight, freeze, that basic survival response that's in the very primitive part of our brain. So when we see something that is potentially threatening, we immediately go into fight, flight, freeze. We stop thinking. the mind just sort of short circuits, and the brain, the central nervous system, that is that part of the brain that's not in our conscious thought, takes over, and we go into fight, flight, freeze. What happens then is we start to go, oh, you know what? Everything's okay. My ego got a little bruised, but I'm not in danger of being killed or hurt. And then the judgment comes in. That's the inner critic. And that actually originates in part of our brain that's right above the primitive brain. It's called the hypothalamus, and it's kind of really right in the, sort of like right below the ears. And it's basically saying, oh, don't do that. So we want to be able to go, oh, there's the inner critic. That's part of my survival system. It's part of who I am as a human being. I don't need to listen to it now. Let me get up into my prefrontal cortex and acknowledge I got triggered. Let me think about this rationally. Let me know I'm an adult, and let me show my agency.
Yeah.
I can take action here. Now, sometimes...
That's sometimes easier said than done, right? I mean,
totally.
Yes. Yes. And you might have been getting there. So I interrupted it. I'm sorry, but I think, my listeners are going, yeah, that's easy for you to say, but there is a difference. And,
yes.
But how can a person get out of their mind enough to be able to tell the difference between that inner critic and their instinct?
Awesome. So with the inner critic, just to wrap him up, because I think of it as a him, mine is a him, very judgmental. You want to understand what triggers you. You want to know if you have a difficult conversation, say with someone who's in authority, you're going to be triggered. So you want to keep breathing, and you want to acknowledge when you hear that little voice. The inner critic sounds significantly different than your instinct voice or your intuition voice. The inner critic is very judgmental, tends to repeat itself, and is kind of angry and nasty. Now, the instinct voice is not even necessarily a voice. It's a sensation in the body. And that actually is coming from our central nervous system, not only from our brain, but our central nervous system that runs through our digestive tract. We talk about gut instinct. People say, oh, I just knew in my gut that was something I needed to do. There's not really a judgment or really any emotion related to instinct. It's a sensation in the body. Maybe it's an openness in the chest. Maybe it's a feeling in the pit of the stomach of this is the direction I need to take. And then with intuition, that is a voice that is not at all judgmental. It's very encouraging. And even if you're in a situation where I remembered once I was in a traffic jam and I thought I was going to pull into a lane, and I was like, don't pull into that lane. And sure enough, 30 seconds later, a car came spinning around the curve and got into that lane I was thinking about pulling into. And that was my intuition, because I'd noticed it's raining, the ground is slick, it's rush hour, and people are rushing and not paying attention. So instinct is more of a sensation. Intuition is more of a guiding voice that's encouraging. And the inner critic is just flat out nasty. So when you hear that little voice that's repetitive, it's always got the same message, you can go, yeah, I got this. Thank you. I know you want to help, but I got this. And remember to keep breathing.
And that's important, because we all have it. We all have that inner critic. So don't think that, oh, I must be less of a person because my inner critic talks to me more. No, we all have it. I mean, my favorite thing that happened to me, this was not too long ago. I heard one of my friends upstairs, and I was like, what is she doing? Like, what? And she was looking at the mirror, and she said, oh, if you don't like it, go find somebody less. And I'm like, is she talking to somebody? And I said, are you okay? She goes, yeah, I was just talking to myself in the mirror. And it was just that. She was having a moment. And so she goes, I was talking back to that person, and I didn't like what that person had to say. And I go, and you weren't on the phone? She goes, no, it was myself. And I'm like, good for you. Good for you. But it's true. And a lot of times, sometimes that inner critic has come from trauma.
Yes.
So how do you define trauma first? And how does that play a role in all of this?
Great question. And I just actually finished a trauma-informed coaching coach course. And the woman who was running it described trauma really simply, which I thought this is a brilliant explanation. Trauma can be too much too fast, too much of an event coming at you, too many events of the same type coming at you, too much and you can't process it, or not enough for too long a period. In other words, not enough validation, not enough support, not enough kindness for too long. And we talk about trauma drama, especially for those of us who work in a corporate setting where there's always a big rush, there's always a big campaign, there's always something that's got to happen. That can cause a type of trauma, too much, too fast. Or it could be something even more difficult, being in a difficult relationship where your needs are not getting met, too much, or not enough. So trauma actually can be addressed by what your friend was doing when she was talking back to herself, where she was discounting that inner critic voice and saying, I don't like what you're saying, and I'm not believing it. And by just repeating those words to herself, she actually was building a new neural pathway in her nervous system, in her brain, a new thought process. And so one of the ways to deal with trauma, number one, long-term trauma, get professional help. There are people who specialize in trauma. Go to a therapist. I highly recommend that. But if it's something that is not overwhelming and not stopping you from being fully functional, then you can do these things. They're also referred to as manifestations, where you repeat to yourself, I am strong, I am powerful, whatever that sentence is, you want to truly start believing and owning. And you repeat it to yourself, and that creates a new neural pathway, i.e. neuroplasticity. And the more you repeat it, and it's got to be a rinse, wash, repeat, keep doing it. You need to do it for 28 days, minimum of 28 days. And you start to go, oh, that little voice, it's lying to me. It popped up when I was small, a child. I didn't have agency. I'm an adult now. I've got agency. I can problem solve. I can figure this out. And I can create a new way of thinking about myself. And that's what's so important.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that as you continue to do it, it becomes a normal habit. And that's why you said, it takes at least those 28 days to form that habit. And you need to keep it up, right? Don't stop, because you can fall out of the habit much quicker than you create it.
Right, exactly. I mean, consider for those of us who brush our teeth every day and floss our teeth, or eat well, or make certain health choices, giving yourself a manifestation or a mantra and repeating it. If you've got a loud inner critic, it's really helpful. That's super helpful.
And I put Post-it notes on my mirror in the morning because, of course, like you said, every morning I'm going in there to use the bathroom, to wash your hands and face, to brush your teeth. I see it. And I see it a couple times a day. And then you're going to automatically repeat it, whether you realize it or not, because you see it, your mind reads it, and then you just start doing it, right? And I think that is so important. Well, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about intuition. Before we go, Lisa, tell listeners how they can learn more about you and your services.
You can go to my website, which is bigsky, bigsky.coach, COACH, or you can drop me an email, lisa@bigsky.coach.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I am Erica Gifford Mills, and you are listening to Get Rooted Radio, living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We are back on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills, living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Don't forget to visit getrootedradio.com to listen to a replay of this episode, sign up for helpful tips, and learn about upcoming events. That's getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Lisa Gillette. Lisa, thank you so much for being on the show today.
My honor. I absolutely adore your show. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you. So you have a podcast. Tell listeners about it.
So my podcast is called Grace, Grit, Getting It Done, because I do believe women have an extraordinary superpower called intuition, and that is the grace and the grit because when you're focused on making the world a better place, which as women, we're kind of hardwired to do, we're all about survival of the species. And right now, the world is in a bit of a problematic state, and we need greater diversity, especially more women in senior leadership. So that's why I started the podcast. Was I knew there was a place for it, and I knew that there are a lot of women in the workspace who were saying, I want to move into a role of higher leadership. How am I going to do this when the playing field is not even?
Yeah. And I know we were probably going to talk more about that in the next segment, but I couldn't resist because, you paid me that great compliment. So I wanted to make sure that people definitely go out and listen to Lisa's podcast. It is amazing. It is wonderful. And her guests are outstanding. So, so during the last couple of segments, we talked about intuition, instinct, the inner critic, and we're going to talk a little bit more about intuition now. And you mentioned that some people discount their intuition, right? So why do you think that people do that?
Well, let's just say, let me take a step back. Many people think intuition is ESP. It's not. ESP is that sixth sense, extrasensory perception, whereas intuition is based on the input that's coming into our brain from our five senses. And let's just acknowledge there's a lot of data coming in every second. And out of about 11 million pieces of data, we are only consciously, and I'm using that word selectively, absorbing maybe 5 to 10. And then we're taking a total of 40 bits, and the subconscious mind, not the unconscious mind, but the subconscious mind, that's that place we go when we're in a theta state, we're doing some activity, we're in the flow. It's that state of where we're definitely here, where maybe we're driving to work or we're doing repetitive movement, but we're not thinking hard. And all of a sudden, we get this download of, oh, I'm putting these pieces of information together. And there's that expression of, well, this idea came to me out of the blue, or, I was in my shower, I was brushing my teeth, and finally I solved this problem. Because our conscious mind, our prefrontal cortex that has a little bit of the judgment responding to the inner critic, is also trying to make sense of the world, of the things that we're paying attention to. When we can actually access what our subconscious mind has collected, stored, and filed, and we're able to make that causal connection and go, oh, I do have an answer. Oh, I did understand this question. That's intuition. So when those downloads happen, we sometimes go, just like we said earlier, oh, I didn't sleep. Maybe I'm not paying attention. Maybe I'm just assuming the worst. Intuition is not going to come on with brute force. Intuition is not going to be judgmental. Intuition is not going to be finger pointing. It's going to say, here's an alternative. Have you considered this? Here's a fully formed plan. Will this work? It's a very gentle voice. So I recommend that you would never tell a child, shut down, stop talking. You'd say, honey, now's not the right time. Can we save this for another time and we'll talk about it? You want to be a positive parent, right? You want to do the same thing with your intuition. You don't want to discount it. You want to look at it and go, will this help me in this moment? Will this help me solve this problem? Chances are really good. The answer is yes, it will. So I think women are kind of taught, there's some judgment there. And we find it in the culture. We find it in societal expectations. And let's stop judging ourselves and just be open to this incoming information that may solve a lot of problems for us.
And I think that is important, is that you decide, because this is this is your intuition. So you decide what makes sense to listen to. Yeah. And I think sometimes people need help in developing that intuition. So how can they try to develop that a little bit more or access it a little bit more?
Right. I have a tool that I love called the 4 domains, and it relates to another tool called Aware. But this particular tool, the 4 domains, if you have to make a big decision or you're struggling with a problem, with some issue, just say, okay, I've made the decision. I have choice A, B. I'm going to go with choice A for the purposes of this exercise. And you literally check in, okay, when I say I've chosen option A, Are my thoughts clear or confused? What are my thoughts? Do I feel, yeah, I made the right choice? Or is that element of, no, I didn't? Then check in with your heart. What are your emotions doing? Are they feeling very safe, or do you feel in danger? Yeah. And then check in with what your body's doing. Do you have a pit in your stomach, or do you feel like your heart is open and expansive? And again, these word choices are specific to me. Maybe you feel, when you feel tense, you feel tension in your neck, or maybe you grip your hands into fists. Well, how's your body responding to this decision you're making? You chose option A. And then the last thing you really want to check in with is, how does this decision align with your higher values? Because let's just acknowledge, whether you're religious, whether you're spiritual, and you believe that there's a reason we were created and that there is some greater intelligence or superpower that we can understand as human beings, we do want to look at, what are my highest values? What is my highest intention? And is this decision in alignment? This choice I made, option A, is it alignment with my highest intention and my highest values? And when you go through this process and you check those 4 domains and you start to go, oh, there's an intelligence in my body that has nothing to do with my thought process. There's an innate intelligence in my heart that has nothing to do with my thought process. Oh, let me check in with my thought process. Let me see what I'm thinking. Are my thoughts muddled or clear? And then what's my highest intention here? And if I make this decision and choose option A, am I in alignment with that? And it's such a great tool because it uses all 4 quadrants. And we actually get a pretty good response and a really intuitive response to, is that the right decision for me?
And it's going back to checking in with yourself, right? And I think that is what is very important, is you are, again, making those decisions. You know yourself best. And as long as you are not lying to yourself and you have that self-awareness, correct, you're going to come out ahead.
Yeah. It's the trust factor. Do we trust ourselves to know what's best for ourselves?
Yep.
And that's giving ourselves permission to go, yeah, I'm an adult. I have agency. I know what my highest values are. I know what my highest intentions are. Let me trust myself.
Yeah. And and sometimes people do have a hard time trusting their instincts, but using that tool, you get over that hump.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I've got a 1-sheet on this. So if any listener would like it, I am happy to share the 1-sheet, and you can reach out to me, lisa@bigsky.coach. That's the email, and I'll send you the 1-sheet. It's a really simple exercise.
No, and I think that's great. So listeners, again, lisa@bigsky.coach for that 1-sheet. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to discuss your big why, Lisa. This is Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. If you missed any of the information during the last segments, go to getrootedradio.com. That's getrootedradio.com to listen to the replay. Don't forget to subscribe, sign up for tips and special events, and pricing for upcoming coaching sessions at getrootedradio.com. Welcome back to my guest, Lisa Gillette. Thank you again for being on the show today.
My absolute pleasure and honor, Erica. Thank you for having me.
So this episode has been all about instinct and intuition. And what I wanted to end the episode on is to talk about your big why and key takeaways from this episode that you think that will really resonate with listeners. And one of the reasons I want to do this is because your big why will resonate with so many listeners. I mean, just like when you talked about your podcast and why you wanted to start the, Grace Grit, Getting It Done. It's important, especially for all of us women. So I wanted to just start off with why did you name your company Big Sky Coaching and Consulting?
Well, there were two reasons. And the first was that when you see the big picture, you find the opportunities. And many times as women, we tend to focus down on the biggest problem in front of us that we're going to fix. And what can happen is we can forget about our own needs. In other words, we forget to sleep, drink enough water, eat the right foods, spend time with our loved ones, because we're so focused on this problem. So I called it Big Sky because it's like, get your head up and look at what's going on. Look at the larger perspective, because not only will you find solutions to whatever it is you're trying to do in your immediate work, you'll also find all sorts of opportunities. And so it had to do with having a wider perspective. The other reason I called it Big Sky is because my father is from Montana, and that is big sky country. And one of the things that I think is so important to get out of our heads and stop the self-judgment is to get out into nature. And I think for many people, when they're out in nature, they do get a sense of literally the most majestic landscape, but the bigger picture and the understanding that our lives here are short. And so what we can do as people is to try and understand, I'm going to drop a couple big words here, but I'll do it anyway, what our purpose is here and how we can make it better for everybody coming after us. And so that's why the company is called Big Sky.
I love it. And I love it for many reasons. One, there's meaning, true meaning, personal and professional meaning behind it. And I also love it because it's very similar to why I named my company Balance Symmetry, because you need to have balance and, symmetry. It's a little play on words, but also symmetry is ending in TREE. It was a nod to my father, who was an arborist, a tree surgeon.
Oh.
And I totally believe in getting out in nature. You don't know, and even if just a walk, right? Even if you live in the city around the block, find yourself a tree, get underneath it. And there's some solace in it, right? It's that fresh air, that thinking. So I love it for both reasons. One, your personal and professional meaning behind it, but two, I did very similar thing. And I love that.
Yeah. We all look for meaning in our own way. And I as you're saying that, I love your logo, which is the image of the tree that is rooted in the ground, centered, solid, and yet with the leaves reaching up to the heavens.
Yep. We need to be like a tree, right? We need to bend and not break. We need to, plant our roots, but be able to grow any which way we need to. And but I love that. So we talked a little bit during the last segment about your podcast and why you decided to start it. So what would you say is the number one, from at least this episode here, key takeaway for listeners?
I think there's two here.
Oh, good. We can have two. We can have as many.
There might be more than that, but coming to mind right now, really the reason I do the work I do, which is leadership, coaching and consulting focused on women, is one, that was my background. I was an executive in sports television, and I'll just say the playing field is not level. There are certain challenges that you've got to navigate as a woman in a leadership role. So one of the things that is very important to me is I see the world right now as being in crisis. 30% of the world does not have access to clean drinking water. 40% of the world does not have access to indoor plumbing. It's really scary. And in this particular country, in America, we are very privileged. We are super privileged. But one of the things we tend to do here is if it's not affecting us, we tend to just kind of pretend it's not a problem. And I see the world right now in crisis. And one of the solutions that I see is possible is having greater diversity in senior leadership, because we need solutions that are not things that were done 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. We need greater diversity, wider perspectives, so we have more input and different voices coming up with solutions for the crisis that we're facing on this planet as human beings. And my particular focus is I want to see more women of all colors. I want to see more people of all colors in senior leadership. But because of my path, I understand what it was to navigate in a corporate setting. So across all foundations, all institutions, all organizations, I want to see greater diversity. And then specifically what we're talking about today, I want to give women permission to go, I don't feel comfortable doing this, but I got a burning desire to do this. I can make it better. Let me go ahead and do it. So to give ourselves permission to speak up, to offer new solutions, to be in places where maybe women are not necessarily accepted, or maybe one or two figureheads are accepted, but to be in those situations where we can really create the change and make the difference that is so needed at this time. So that's the podcast. That's, what gets me out of bed every morning. And I think that's what's going to keep me alive, at least until my 90s. I mean, I got some mileage on me.
I love it. No, and I think it is truly important, right? Is not only making room at the table, but even if they're not at the table, speaking about others in a room they're not present in a kind and uplifting manner, right? If you have somebody that you have another woman, let's lift one another up.
Absolutely.
Let's make sure that we are not being part of the problem.
Yes.
And we are putting forth those individuals who can succeed and that we're lifting them up. And I truly believe we're getting better as a society on that from a woman to woman perspective. I think for a while, it might've been a little rough, right? We felt some folks felt that it was a competition as opposed to a uplifting experience. And we want to break that. If we're going to get more diverse individuals, we're going to have more women in leadership, senior leadership roles, we need to support one another and lift each other up to get there.
Yeah. We need to create our circle of support, and we need to be able to take that intention out to the world in general. Yeah.
Right. I think it's such an important topic, and it's not, and again, it's not just, it's women of all diversity, right? It's just, we have to look at diversity, equity, inclusion, and making sure that we are creating a society that we're truly living in, right? Because we are a very diverse society. We have different ages, in the workforce. We have different colors in the workforce. We have different cultures, backgrounds, religions, and we need to ensure that we have that representation across the board.
Yeah, completely agreed with you.
Yeah. So what's the best way for folks to learn more about your services, to outreach to you, or, just drop you a question if they have one?
Well, I will tell you, I have 92,000 followers on Instagram. So if you like little strategy bites, I drop them every day.
Yes.
That handle is Big Sky Coach _Lisa_Gillette. If you just start searching for Big Sky Coach on Instagram, you will find me. You can reach out to me via email, lisa@bigsky.coach, or you can check out my website. You can connect with me there. There's some complimentary items and resources, and that is www.bigsky.coach.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being on the show today. It's always a pleasure. I haven't seen you in person since last March, but hopefully that will change very soon. I'm going to get back out to California, and I'll have to, if I'm in your area, I will have to look you up.
Let me take you to lunch, please. And Erica, it was absolutely my honor to be on your show. I think what you're doing here is a really important message that is very empowering. And let me just say, life-changing. So fantastic work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. And I want to thank you all for tuning in to Get Rooted Radio. If you missed any part of today's episode or you want to listen again, go to getrootedradio.com for the podcast. And don't forget to tune in the first and third Monday of each month at 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, and 2 p.m. Pacific right here on Transformation Talk Radio. And one other thing, if there's any topic you listeners want to hear more about, please let me know. Reach out, drop me a line. If you have any questions on any of our guests or want additional information, you missed something, go back and listen. There are so many great episodes out there. Thank you for tuning in. Have an amazing day. And I'm looking forward to the next time on Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, letting it go. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Get Rooted Radio with Erica Gifford Mills. Living it up, loving it up, and letting it go. Visit GetRootedRadio.com if you've missed any part of this hit show. And tune in on TransformationTalkRadio.com to live fearlessly in your more and powerfully rooted in your unlimited yes. For more information and to work with Erica directly, visit GetRootedRadio.com. That's GetRootedRadio.com, and get ready to live it up, love it up, and let it go.